Can you pretend to be my wife for 6 weeks? The CEO begged the waitress to save his foster daughter. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Emma Santos was pretty sure she'd perfected the art of watching other people's happiness from a safe distance. Because after spending the first 18 years of her life bouncing between 7 different foster homes, she learned real quick that family was something that happened to other people. Not to girls like her who aged out of the system with nothing but a garbage bag full of clothes and a social worker's half-hearted good luck. Now at 30 years old, she spent her days serving pancakes and refilling coffee cups at Riverside Cafe, smiling at families who had no idea how lucky they were to take each other for granted. And honestly, most days she was fine with being on the outside looking in. It hurt less that way. Saturday mornings were always the worst though, when the cafe filled up with parents and kids doing that whole weekend brunch thing. Dads reading the paper while moms cut up waffles into tiny pieces, kids giggling over chocolate milk and leaving sticky fingerprints on every surface they could reach. Emma weaved between tables with practiced efficiency, her blonde ponytail swinging as she balanced 3 plates on one arm, and somehow still managed to grab the syrup bottle a toddler was about to knock over without even breaking stride. Her co-worker Lisa cornered her at the coffee station during a brief lull, lowering her voice like she was about to share state secrets. So I talked to my loan officer yesterday, and apparently there's this consolidation thing that might help. But honestly, Emma, $30,000 is a lot of debt for a bachelor's degree you're not even using. Emma just shrugged and grabbed 2 mugs off the rack, because yeah, she knew the art history degree gathering dust in her studio apartment wasn't exactly paying dividends. But college had been her way of proving she was more than just another foster kid statistic. Even if the student loans were currently drowning her in monthly payments she could barely afford. The bell above the cafe door chimed and Emma glanced up out of habit, then felt something in her chest do this weird little flip because the 8-year-old girl who just walked in was already scanning the room looking for her. And when their eyes met, the kid's whole face lit up like Emma had personally hung the moon just for her. Mia Turner was all golden curls and big brown eyes, wearing a purple dress with stars on it, and she made a beeline straight for Emma despite the tall man in the expensive suit trying to steer her toward their usual corner booth. "Miss Emma!" Mia crashed into her legs in what was technically a hug, but felt more like a full-body tackle from someone who weighed maybe 60 pounds soaking wet. "I made you something!" She thrust a piece of construction paper at Emma, slightly crumpled from being shoved in a backpack, and Emma's throat went tight because the crayon drawing showed 3 stick figures sitting at a table, labeled in wobbly letters as "Me and Mr. David and Miss Emma," with a big red heart drawn around all of them and the words "My favorite people" across the top. The man, David Cross, caught up to them, looking equal parts apologetic and exhausted, running a hand through dark hair that probably cost more to cut than Emma made in a week. "I'm sorry. She's been talking about showing you that picture since Wednesday. I couldn't get her to wait until we actually sat down." He had these tired eyes that made him look older than he probably was, maybe late 30s, and Emma noticed the tan line on his left ring finger where a wedding band used to be. Noticed it because she'd gotten real good over the years at spotting the little details that told you someone's whole story without them having to say a word. "It's beautiful, Mia," Emma said, crouching down so she was eye level with the kid. "Can I keep it?" Mia nodded so hard her curls bounced everywhere, and Emma carefully tucked the drawing into her apron pocket like it was something precious, because the truth was, it kind of felt that way. Felt like maybe this little girl saw her as more than just the waitress who remembered she liked chocolate chip pancakes with no strawberries because strawberries were too squishy. They settled into their usual booth by the window, the one they'd been claiming every Saturday for the past 3 months, and Emma brought over their drinks without having to ask what they wanted because she'd memorized their order the way she memorized all the regulars. Except these two felt different somehow, felt like they'd carved out a space in her carefully constructed walls without even trying. She was refilling David's coffee when she overheard Mia say something that made her hand freeze mid-pour. "Do you think Mommy and Daddy can see us from heaven, Mr. David? Do you think they know you're taking good care of me?" The little girl's voice was so matter-of-fact, like she was asking about the weather, but David's whole face did this thing where it tried to stay composed and failed completely. "I think they know, sweetheart," he said quietly. and Emma saw his jaw clench the way people's jaws do when they're trying real hard not to fall apart in public. And I think they're really proud of you for being so brave. Emma made herself walk away before they noticed her eavesdropping, but her mind was already putting pieces together. Foster care, recent loss, a CEO playing temporary dad to his dead employee's kid. And yeah, she knew that story, knew it from the inside out. Back at the counter, Lisa was going on about her loan consolidation thing again, and Emma found herself saying out loud, "I'm never getting out from under this debt. I'm going to be 35 and still serving pancakes and living in that shoebox apartment because I can't save enough to do anything else." And she didn't mean for it to sound so defeated, but sometimes the truth just came out that way. What Emma didn't notice was David Cross sitting 2 tables over, coffee cup halfway to his lips, absolutely listening to every word she just said. And when Mia tugged on his sleeve and asked, "Can Miss Emma come over to our house sometime? Maybe for dinner?" Something shifted in his expression, like puzzle pieces clicking together in his head to form a picture Emma definitely wasn't going to like. 20 minutes later, when David paid the bill, he didn't head straight for the door like usual. Instead, he stood there holding Mia's hand and looking at Emma with this intensity that made her nervous. "Miss Santos," he said, and his voice had gone all formal and serious, "could I speak with you privately for a moment before we leave? It's important." Emma followed David outside onto the sidewalk where the morning sun was already getting warm, and Mia stayed inside with Lisa, who'd bribed her with a free cookie, which meant whatever David wanted to talk about was definitely not something he wanted his foster daughter overhearing. He shoved his hands in his pockets and looked like a man about to jump off a cliff without checking if there was water below. And honestly, Emma was already bracing herself for whatever weird thing was about to come out of his mouth, because rich guys always had weird requests. "This is going to sound completely insane," David started, then stopped, then tried again. "I've been Mia's foster parent for 4 months now, ever since her parents died in a car accident. They worked for me and they put me down as emergency guardian in their will because they didn't have any other family." Emma nodded, staying quiet, letting him get to whatever point he was circling around like a nervous helicopter. "The adoption hearing is in 6 weeks, and the agency keeps hinting that a single dad who works 60-hour weeks isn't their ideal placement. They want to see family stability, 2-parent household, the whole picture." Emma's stomach dropped because she could see exactly where this was heading, and she already hated it. "Mr. Cross, I don't think—" But he cut her off, the words tumbling out faster now, like if he didn't say them all at once, he'd lose his nerve completely. "I overheard you talking about your debt, $30,000, and I know that's none of my business, but I'm desperate here, and I need help, and you need money, and Mia already loves you." He took a breath. "I'll pay off your entire student loan debt if you pretend to be my wife for 6 weeks, just until the adoption goes through, attend the agency visits, make it look like we're a stable family unit. That's it." Emma actually laughed because what else do you do when a millionaire CEO just propositioned you like you're living in some badly written romance novel? "You want me to commit fraud against a state adoption agency for money? Are you hearing yourself right now?" Her voice went up about 3 octaves. "I could get arrested. You could lose Mia anyway. This is the stupidest plan I've ever heard, and I've heard some pretty stupid plans." David's face fell, and he looked about 10 years older all of a sudden. "I know it's asking too much. I know it's wrong. But if I don't do something, they're going to put her into the foster system, and I can't. I promised her parents I'd take care of her, and I can't let her down." The desperation in his voice was so raw it actually hurt to hear, but Emma was already shaking her head and backing toward the cafe door. "I'm sorry, I really am, but I can't help you with this. Find someone else." And she turned to go inside. But that's when she heard it, the sound that changed everything. Mia's high-pitched scream cutting through the glass door like a knife. Emma shoved through the entrance and found Mia on the floor between tables, hyperventilating so hard she was turning red, hands clutching at her chest like she couldn't get enough air, eyes wild and unfocused. Lisa was crouched beside her, looking completely panicked, and other customers were staring, and David was frozen in the doorway like seeing Mia fall apart had short-circuited his entire brain. Emma dropped to her knees and grabbed Mia's shaking hands, her voice going soft and steady, the way the good foster moms used to talk to her when she'd had nightmares. Mia, baby, look at me. Just at me. Nowhere else. Mia's terrified eyes found hers. Good girl. Now we're going to count colors, okay? What color is my shirt? Mia gasped out, yellow between sobs, and Emma kept going. Perfect. What color are your shoes? Another gasp. Purple. And slowly, so slowly, Mia's breathing started to even out until she just collapsed forward into Emma's arms and cried like her heart was breaking into a million pieces. I don't want to leave, Mr. David, Mia sobbed into Emma's shoulder. Please don't let them take me away. I already lost Mommy and Daddy. I can't lose him too. And Emma, who'd sworn she'd never let herself care this much, who'd built walls specifically to avoid this kind of pain, felt every single defense she'd ever constructed just crumble to dust. Emma stood in the marble foyer of David Cross's house with her beat-up suitcase looking like it belonged in a donation bin. And honestly, the whole place felt more like a museum than somewhere an actual human being lived. All cold white walls and glass everything, and not a single family photo or kid's drawing stuck to the refrigerator. Mia came bouncing down the curved staircase wearing pajamas with astronauts on them. Her whole face lit up like Emma showing up was the best thing that had happened to her in months. And yeah, Emma's heart definitely did something complicated in her chest watching this kid who'd already lost everything get excited about a lie. I picked flowers for your room. Mia grabbed Emma's hand and started dragging her up the stairs before David could even offer to carry the suitcase. Mr. David said I could pick anything from the garden, and I got the yellow ones because they're happy colors, and I want you to be happy here. The guest bedroom was about 3 times the size of Emma's entire studio apartment, with an actual sitting area and a bathroom that had heated floors, and there on the nightstand sat a mason jar stuffed full of dandelions and wildflowers. Clearly picked by a kid who cared more about quantity than arrangement. David appeared in the doorway, holding what looked like a 3-ring binder, thick enough to be a PhD dissertation. And when he set it on the bed, Emma saw the label written in neat block letters that said Our Story, with actual tabs dividing different sections. I made us a backstory, he said, looking slightly embarrassed about the whole thing. We met at a hospital charity gala 2 years ago. You spilled champagne on my shoes. We got married 6 months ago in a small ceremony. You moved in officially last month, but we're still adjusting. He flipped through pages showing a timeline, fake anniversary dates, even photoshopped pictures of them together at events that never happened. Emma picked up one of the photos showing her face badly edited onto some woman's body standing next to David at what looked like a wedding, and she had to fight the urge to laugh, because this was absolutely the most ridiculous thing she'd ever agreed to. You really went all in on this, huh? David had the decency to look sheepish. The caseworker is very thorough. I can't afford any slip-ups. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Patterson from the adoption agency showed up for the first home visit, wearing a blazer that screamed, I've seen every trick in the book, and carrying a clipboard that Emma was pretty sure had a checklist titled, Ways to Spot Fake Marriages. David put his arm around Emma's waist when he answered the door, and she went completely stiff, like someone had replaced her spine with a metal rod. And yeah, they were definitely not winning any awards for Believable Couple of the Year. Mrs. Patterson asked them how they met, and David started telling the champagne story, while Emma nodded along, except he said it was red wine, and she'd said champagne 2 minutes earlier when Mia asked. And Mrs. Patterson's eyebrow went up just enough to let them know she'd caught the inconsistency. They gave her the house tour, showed her Mia's room with its explosion of purple everything, and the walls covered in drawings, and when Mrs. Patterson asked Mia directly, Do you like having Emma here? The kid's answer was so genuine it hurt. She makes breakfast like Mommy used to, the pancakes with the smiley faces, and when I have bad dreams she sits with me until I fall back asleep, and she doesn't act like it's annoying. Mia said it all matter of fact while coloring at the kitchen table, not even looking up. Mr. David tries, but he's not really good at the feeling stuff yet, but Miss Emma knows how to make the scare go away. Emma watched Mrs. Patterson write something in her notes and felt her stomach drop, because that answer was either going to save them or completely destroy their cover, depending on whether the caseworker thought an 8-year-old could tell the difference between real love and a business arrangement. After Mrs. Patterson left, Emma found David in his home office staring at his computer screen without actually seeing it. And when she asked if he thought the visit went okay, he just shook his head. She knows something's off. I could see it in her face. He looked up at Emma, and for the first time since this whole mess started, she saw actual fear there. Not the controlled CEO version, but the raw kind that comes from knowing you might lose the most important thing in your life. I don't know what I'll do if they take her, Emma. She's all I think about anymore. Making sure she's okay, making sure she feels safe. Emma sat down across from him without being invited because somewhere in the past 2 weeks the formality between them had started dissolving. Then we get better at this. We practice until it looks real. What she didn't say out loud was that it was already starting to feel real. That coming home to Mia's excited greeting and helping with homework and having family dinners was filling up empty spaces inside her she'd forgotten existed. And that was way more dangerous than any adoption agency catching them in a lie. Mrs. Patterson called on a Tuesday evening, and her voice had that syrupy sweet quality that meant she was absolutely about to ruin someone's day. I'd like to do a surprise home visit tomorrow around 6, just to see your family's natural dynamic without all the preparation. And the way she said natural made it crystal clear she thought there was nothing natural about any of this. David hung up and looked at Emma with the kind of panic usually reserved for people who just realized they left the stove on before leaving for vacation. And yeah, they had about 20 hours to become the world's most convincing fake married couple, or watch this whole thing blow up in their faces. They spent the next day drilling each other like they were cramming for a final exam neither of them had studied for, firing questions back and forth while Mia was at school. "What's my coffee order?" Emma asked, and David hesitated way too long before guessing, vanilla latte, when the answer was black coffee with 2 sugars because she wasn't fancy enough for lattes on a waitress salary. "Where did we have our first kiss?" David tried, and Emma made up something about a park bench that sounded romantic enough, except she said East Side and he'd written West Side in the binder, and they both realized they were absolutely going to fail this surprise inspection. Mia got home from school and found them in the living room still rehearsing, and she tilted her head with that too smart for her own good expression kids get when they know something's weird, but can't quite figure out what. "Why are you guys asking each other stuff you should already know? You're married, you're supposed to know everything about each other." Emma and David exchanged the kind of guilty look that probably would have been funny if their entire plan wasn't currently falling apart, and that's when the doorbell rang 20 minutes early, because apparently Mrs. Patterson believed in psychological warfare. The visit started okay, just casual conversation in the living room, Mrs. Patterson asking about their week and whether Mia was adjusting well to having Emma around full-time. But then she started dropping questions that felt like landmines, asking Emma where David kept his coffee mugs and watching her face when Emma pointed to the wrong cabinet, asking about their bedroom situation and why Emma's clothes were still in the guest room closet when David said she'd moved in a month ago. Every wrong answer felt like another nail in a coffin Emma could practically hear hammering shut. Then Mrs. Patterson asked to see their bedroom, and Emma felt her heart drop straight through the floor because they'd never actually combined their spaces, never thought the caseworker would want to see inside their actual private areas. David stammered something about redecorating, and Emma backed him up, but they both sounded like terrible liars, and Mrs. Patterson's expression went from suspicious to downright certain she'd caught them red-handed. That's when Mia, sweet oblivious Mia who'd been coloring quietly in the corner, decided to be helpful. "Miss Emma's room is really pretty now. She fixed it up nice since she only moved in for the agency visits like Mr. David told me." The entire room went dead silent, and Emma watched the last bit of hope drain out of David's face like someone had pulled a plug. Mrs. Patterson stood up slowly, her voice going ice cold in that professional way that's somehow worse than yelling. "Mr. Cross, Miss Santos, I need to speak with you both privately, right now." They followed her into David's office while Mia stayed in the living room, and the second the door closed, Mrs. Patterson let them have it. "I've been doing this job for 23 years, and I can spot a fake marriage from a mile away. The separate rooms, the inconsistent stories, the child who clearly doesn't understand why the adults are pretending." She looked between them with something that might have been disappointment if it wasn't buried under so much anger. You committed fraud against a state agency. You manipulated a vulnerable child, and you actually thought you could lie your way into an adoption. David tried to explain, but Emma couldn't stay quiet anymore. Couldn't let him take all the blame when she'd walked into this with eyes wide open. He was desperate, and the system was going to take her away from the only stability she has left. Her voice cracked. I was in foster care. I aged out at 18 with nothing and nobody, and I couldn't stand by and watch another kid go through what I went through. Mrs. Patterson's expression flickered with something that might have been understanding, but she shook her head. Good intentions don't excuse breaking the law. I'm required to report this, and I can almost guarantee the adoption board will deny his application. Emma started packing her stuff that night because staying felt like twisting the knife deeper, and when David found her shoving clothes into her suitcase, he looked like a man watching his last hope walk out the door. If I leave, maybe they'll go easier on you. Maybe you can convince them I manipulated you too, Emma said without looking at him. Because if she looked, she'd start crying, and she'd promised herself a long time ago she was done crying over things she couldn't have. But then Mia appeared in the doorway in her astronaut pajamas, with tears streaming down her face, and she looked at Emma with those big brown eyes full of betrayal that cut deeper than any caseworker's disappointment ever could. You're leaving, just like everyone leaves. And Emma, who'd survived 18 years of people leaving, who'd built walls specifically so this could never hurt her again, fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around this kid she'd known for 3 months and loved like she'd been hers from the start. 2 weeks dragged by like someone had replaced time with concrete, and Emma went back to serving pancakes at Riverside Cafe like nothing had changed except everything had changed, and she couldn't look at the corner booth without feeling like someone had scooped out her insides with a rusty spoon. Her coworker Lisa kept asking if she was okay, and Emma kept lying and saying she was fine. But the truth was, she hadn't been fine since she walked out of that house and left behind the closest thing to a family she'd ever known. The envelope showed up at her apartment on a Thursday, plain white with her name written in David's neat handwriting, and inside was a check for $30,000 with a note that just said, "You earned this, the hearing is Friday," like he was paying off a contractor instead of the woman who'd fallen in love with his kid. Emma stared at that check and felt absolutely nothing. Because yeah, the debt was gone, but the hole in her chest where Mia used to fit wasn't something money could fix. Friday morning, she called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, sat on her couch staring at the wall and thinking about Mia standing in that courthouse right now, probably terrified and confused about why Miss Emma had disappeared like everyone else in her life disappears. The thought made Emma's stomach turn, made her grab her keys and run for the door before her brain could catch up with what her heart already knew. The courthouse hallway smelled like floor polish and broken dreams, and Emma could hear voices coming from the hearing room, could hear David's voice explaining to a bunch of strangers on a board why he deserved to keep the little girl he loved. She slipped in through the back doors as quietly as she could, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could probably hear it, and that's when she saw Mia stand up from her seat next to David, looking tiny and brave, and absolutely terrified. "Miss Emma didn't pretend," Mia said in this small, shaky voice that carried through the whole room anyway. "She made me feel safe when I had bad dreams, and she taught me how to make my mommy's pancakes, and she stayed when I cried about missing my parents." The little girl's voice broke completely. "Mr. David loves me even though I'm not really his, and Miss Emma loved me too. Please don't take me away from my family. I already lost one." Emma didn't remember deciding to move, didn't remember walking down that center aisle. But suddenly she was standing in front of the board and every eye in the room was on her. "I'm sorry I'm late, but I need to say something." The board chairman nodded for her to continue, and Emma took the biggest breath of her life. "My name is Emma Santos, and I was in foster care from age 6 to 18. I know exactly what it feels like to be Mia, and when David asked me to pretend to be his wife, I said yes because I couldn't let another kid go through what I survived." She looked at David for the first time since she'd walked out 2 weeks ago. "But I stopped pretending somewhere between bedtime stories and family dinners. I fell in love with both of them, and I'm not leaving again." The board went quiet, whispering among themselves for what felt like 17 years. And then the chairman cleared his throat. While we don't condone deception, we're tasked with determining what's best for the child. And it's clear Mia has found genuine love and stability with Mr. Cross. He paused. Adoption approved, conditional on family counseling, and regular check-ins for the next year. 6 months later, Emma was refilling coffee at Riverside Cafe when the bell chimed and Mia came running in wearing her purple backpack. Except this time, instead of yelling for Miss Emma, she yelled, "Mom!" And yeah, Emma's heart still hadn't gotten used to that word. David followed behind, looking less like the stressed CEO who'd propositioned her in a parking lot and more like a man who'd finally figured out what actually mattered. And when Emma's shift ended, she slid into the booth next to them instead of serving them. Tell the story again about how you and Daddy met, Mia demanded through a mouthful of chocolate chip pancakes, and Emma and David exchanged a look that said everything about fake marriages that became real families and desperate plans that somehow worked out anyway. Well, kiddo, it started with a very stupid idea and a waitress who should have said no, Emma began, and David reached over to take her hand, the one wearing a simple gold band that wasn't part of any agency requirement anymore. Mia giggled. And then they lived happily ever after. Emma kissed the top of her daughter's head and corrected gently, "Not ever after yet, baby. We're still figuring it out as we go." Sometimes family isn't about blood or paperwork or doing everything right. It's about who shows up when everything's falling apart and decides to stay anyway. If this story reminded you that second chances are real and love doesn't always follow the rules, hit that subscribe button and join us for more stories that prove the best families are the ones we choose. Thanks for being here with us.